The Supreme Court recently denied a stay that would have protected a state's Second Amendment sanctuary law. And now the Eighth Circuit is set to rule in this case, and it might get entirely thrown out. So let's talk about what is happening. Now, really quick before we jump into this video, I want to thank one of the main sponsors of this channel, which is Kershaw Knives. Kershaw makes some of the best knives available on the market if you're looking for a quality EDC knife. I carry a Kershaw Iridium knife every single day for my EDC, and right now I'm actually going to pick up one of their Malibu knives. And so if you want a quality EDC knife, head over to Kershaw, and if you use the code ARMED40, you can get 40% off of your order. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we're going to be talking about an 8-to-1 order that was issued by the Supreme Court and how it's currently impacting a state's Second Amendment sanctuary law, or their SAPA law. The recent Supreme Court order denied a stay which would have protected Missouri's Second Amendment Preservation Act, their SAPA law. After that denial order, the case was then sent back down to the Eighth Circuit 3-judge panel, who recently held arguments and heard arguments in this case. And this is an important case because it's one of the first ones making its way through the process about a state putting in place a Second Amendment sanctuary law for the entire state. The Eighth Circuit will now decide whether or not Missouri and their SAPA law is in fact valid or not, and whether or not the lower court was correct in blocking the entire law. But now the state of Missouri has a new decision to support why this lawsuit should completely be thrown out and why the federal government cannot sue the state to stop the SAPA law, and how the Supreme Court has recently actually reaffirmed that what the lower court did, just broadly enjoining the entire law against everyone, is in fact incorrect. Now, for some background on this case, back in 2021, Missouri passed a law known as, again, the Second Amendment Preservation Act, the SAPA law. That law set the state's interpretation of the Second Amendment and set restrictions on the support and funding to enforce inconsistent federal laws. The law prohibits Missouri's officers, agents, and government officials from helping federal agents who are attempting to enforce inconsistent federal laws. The law in Missouri uses the 10th Amendment as a basis to refuse state resources and state funding and assistance to federal agents and federal officials who are aiming to infringe on the Second Amendment and the right of individuals in Missouri. Now, in response, of course, the United States government, the federal government, the DOJ, sued the state of Missouri for putting in place this law. And on review, the district court agreed with the Biden administration and struck down the entire law. Now, again, that's going to be very important for the discussion that we have later in this video about what now is developing. Now, the Missouri law here is actually similar in nature to what Texas did with SB 8 in their abortion law, and what the Supreme Court recently said in that issue about SB 8 in the whole women's health case. Now, very importantly, also, the Texas SB 8 issue did make its way to the Supreme Court in the whole women's health versus Jackson case. And the Supreme Court found that since the Texas law is not enforced by the state or its agents, then you cannot seek this umbrella injunction against it. You could also not get an injunction against the judges who hear the lawsuits or even the clerks who are involved. Instead, again, you would have to get an injunction against each and every individual who files a lawsuit. So that's the backdrop of what the Missouri 2A Preservation Act does, and a similar lawsuit that made its way to the Supreme Court. Now, after the district court ruled in favor of the Biden administration, striking down the Missouri Preservation Act, the state of Missouri then appealed up to the Eighth Circuit. Missouri also asked for the Eighth Circuit to stay the lower court's decision while the appeal was taking place. However, the Eighth Circuit denied that stay, and that led Missouri for the first time to go to the Supreme Court and file an emergency application to the Supreme Court for them to grant a stay on that lower court decision, which struck down the entire SAPA law. Essentially, they wanted it to still be in place and be in place at least until the Eighth Circuit decided on the appeal. But then we got an order from the Supreme Court, and it was an 8-to-1 order denying Missouri's request for the stay. And actually, only Justice Thomas was the one in favor of granting the stay. And it seems like oftentimes now, Justice Thomas is the lone justice sitting by himself, dissenting, actually wanting to protect the Second Amendment. Now, after the Supreme Court denied that case, it was then sent back down to the Eighth Circuit, who has now heard expedited arguments in this case. And now we're currently waiting for the Eighth Circuit to rule and issue their decision. Now, during those arguments, the Missouri state's representative argued that this entire lawsuit brought by the United States government is in fact invalid because the lawsuit does not name a proper defendant. The government here, the federal government, is suing the state of Missouri and the Missouri Attorney General, Andrew Bailey, who actually we maybe could have on the channel here very soon. So if you guys want a further breakdown of what's going on with some of those things from an Attorney General, part of these lawsuits, let me know down in the comment section. But essentially, they argued like none of these individuals are actually enforcing this. This is the private individuals, and therefore you haven't named a proper defendant. Now, after those arguments, the state of Missouri actually received some support from various cases and decisions, not just out of the 8th Circuit, but also out of the Supreme Court. Missouri recently submitted a letter to the 8th Circuit on why the federal government does not have standing to sue them based on a recent decision, and that entire case here actually should be thrown out because of this new precedent. Now, in the letter, Missouri states that the Ark of Iowa versus Reynolds case actually supports what their lawsuit is and what their arguments are here. They then point out here that the federal government of the United States doesn't really have standing, that they haven't actually shown that they themselves have suffered any injury. Instead, they are trying to step in the place of other officials, state officials of Missouri, step in their place and get relief on behalf of those state officials. And the argument here is if those individual state officials want protections or you want to challenge this SAPA law in Missouri, well, that's for them to do, not for the federal government to step in their place. Again, this is all coming down to a new standing argument and an attempt to now have the entire case thrown out for a lack of standing on part of the federal government. Now, also, like I mentioned, there was a new Supreme Court decision. It was a 6-3 opinion, and it was a majority authored by Justice Gorsuch talking about broad-reaching universal relief, striking down entire state laws and not keeping it isolated to just named defendants or named individuals. Now, Justice Gorsuch, in his concurrence, which I believe was joined by Thomas and Alito, they stated that early in the litigation below, the district court issued a preliminary injunction. Ordinarily, injunctions like these may go no further than necessary to provide interim relief to the parties. In this case, however, the district court went much further, prohibiting a state from enforcing any aspect of its duly enacted law against anyone. Today, this court stays the district court's injunction to the extent it applies to non-parties, which is to say, to the extent it provides universal relief. That is a welcome development. So again, very important here where you have the Supreme Court signaling in some of these other cases that universal relief that goes beyond the actual named plaintiffs is too much. Now, the nuance here is, of course, you have the federal government who is the named plaintiff suing here. So there's a lot of questions about can the United States government, the federal government itself, get universal relief? And would that just not lead to the end result that they want? Or like Missouri is arguing here, maybe the federal government here doesn't have standing at all. They should have had individual named plaintiffs who have a true injury that is traceable to them as plaintiffs so that maybe they could get relief, but this broad-reaching universal relief should not be allowed. So again, the new decision by the 8th Circuit points to the fact that the federal government cannot seek the relief against the state of Missouri since the state and the attorney general are not the ones actually enforcing the law. And then you have this new Supreme Court precedent that actually brings into question what the lower court did, issuing universal relief. So again, this is going to be something very interesting to see how it develops, how some of these things trickle into this lawsuit and decision by the 8th Circuit. Right now, we're waiting for the 8th Circuit to issue their decision, and they're looking at a lot of new precedent because a lot of things have developed since they heard this case. So again, that's for you guys in Missouri. I know a lot of people are curious about what's going on with state sanctuary laws and some of these issues. That's what's currently going on. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and comment down below, and I will try to answer to the best of my ability. Also, if you guys like this video and you'd like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm, and it signals to YouTube that you guys see value in these videos and in this type of 2A news. But as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and never forget this is with Built by ARM Scholars, and this nation will be maintained by ARM Scholars.